Leaving Ukiah, headed south on State Street. Southbound on State Street, Ukiah feels quiet in the morning. The town stretches out in a long line of storefronts, neighborhoods, and open pockets of valley air. A few minutes down the road, the Ukiah Airport comes up on the left, a small working airfield with a single runway, a handful of hangars, and that familiar row of parked aircraft. It's the kind of airport that serves crop dusters, medevac flights, and weekend pilots sitting low against the valley floor with the hills rising behind it. Ukiah sits in the center of Mendocino County, a valley town surrounded by vineyards, orchards, and low-rolling hills. The name Ukiah comes from the Pomo phrase Ukiah, Yokaya, meaning deep valley or south valley. It's a fitting name. The town rests in a long, sheltered basin carved by time and the weather, with the hills rising gently on all sides. Ukiah has always been a working town. Agriculture, timber, small industry, and the everyday rhythm of people who live close to the land. You see it in the vineyards stretching across the valley floor, the old ranch properties tucked into the foothills, and in the mix of local businesses along State Street. It's also a place with its own quiet history. The Pomo people lived here for thousands of years before settlers arrived in the mid-1800s. The town grew around the stage routes and early farms, eventually becoming the county seat. Today it is a blend of old and new. Courthouse, coffee shops, small breweries, and neighborhoods shaded by big valley oaks. Ukiah isn't flashy. It's steady, grounded, and shaped by the landscape around it. A deep valley town with a long memory sitting right at the gateway to the inland hills and the road that eventually leads to the coast. Past the airport, State Street starts to thin out. The town gives way to open land, scattered businesses, and the last signs of Ukiah before the highway takes over. A few miles south, the road reaches the on-ramp to Highway 101, the main north-south spine of Mendocino County. You pass the southbound entrance, stay straight, and just beyond it comes the turnoff, a simple sign pointing towards Highway 253. It's an easy turn, almost understated, but it marks the shift from valley to hills. This is where the real drive begins, leaving Ukiah behind and heading towards Boonville, towards Anderson Valley, and eventually the coast. It's a quick rise, the kind that reminds you this road was never built for comfort. Before the state signed it as a highway back in the early 60s, locals just called it the Boonville Road. A wagon route used to move sheep and cattle between the inland heat and the cooler coastal pastures. You can still feel that old purpose in the way the road folds across the hills. The grade tightens, then turns, sharpen, and suddenly you're in the oak and chaparral country above Ukiah. Dry slopes, wide sky, inland air. It's a different Mendocino County up here. Not the redwood tunnel you get on Highway 20, but open ridges and sun-baked hillsides. There's a pullout near the top where the whole Ukiah Valley spreads out behind you, vineyards and neighborhoods laid out like a map. Up on the ridge, you're skimming the edge of bootleg country, where old-timers once spoke their own local dialect. They even had a name for this road, the Ukiah Hoon, the Ukiah Road. You won't hear it much now, but the landscape still carries that feeling of being between two worlds. This is where the journey really begins. The road rises fast, twisting into the inland hills, carrying us towards Anderson Valley. When we reach the end of 253, we'll roll right into Boonville. That's a good place to pause. Anderson Valley Brewing sits there waiting, tucked into the trees, a perfect spot to recover before the next leg of the trip to Fort Bragg. So settle in, the valley is behind us, the hills are ahead, and the coast is still out there waiting. So put both hands on the wheel and enjoy the ride. And if you're not the one driving, then just sit back and take in the scenery, because this stretch out of Ukiah has a way of showing off the valley before the hills take over. Getting from Ukiah to the coast means committing to windy, narrow mountain roads, no matter which way you point your rig. Every route climbs, twists, and drops through the inland hills before you ever see a hint of ocean. The quickest way is the familiar one, heading north on 101, slipping through Willits, and catching the Highway 20 turnoff. It's the straight-ahead get-there route. A climb out of Willits, a long run through the redwoods, and about an hour and 20 minutes later, you're rolling into Fort Bragg. But today I'm taking the slower, more interesting way. South out of Ukiah, then west on Highway 253. It's only about 17 miles to Boonville, but there's 17 miles that feel like a whole different country. The road rises fast out of the Ukiah Valley, curling through Oak and Chaparral, then drops you into Anderson Valley with those wide inland views, and that first shift in the air. No redwoods yet, just dry hillsides, scattered shade, and the quiet that comes with leaving the valley behind. From Boonville, most folks stay on 128 and follow the Navarro River all the way out to Highway 1. That stretch is about 28 miles, and it's where landscape finally changes. The redwoods start showing up. Closer to Philo, the river settles into its bends, and the road carries you west until it meets the ocean. From there, it's a short 13-mile run north on Highway 1 to Fort Bragg, with the coast opening up in front of you. But I'm not staying on 128 today. Instead, I'm taking Flynn Creek Road, the back way over to Ukiah Road. You'll see that part in my next video. It's longer, narrower, and definitely windier than sticking with 128, but depending on the day, it can actually be faster, or at least more relaxing. Holiday traffic on 128 can stack up behind RVs and rental cars, and sometimes the quiet of Flynn Creek is worth the extra curves. It's one of those Mendocino detours where you trade a little time for a lot of peace. There are other year-round routes too. They're all part of the Mendocino Maze, but today it's 253, Boonville, Flynn Creek, Comanche, and finally Highway 1 back into Fort Bragg. The descent off the ridge feels like easing into a different pocket of Mendocino County. The inland heat softens, the light changes, and the hills open up into the first wide views of Anderson Valley. Oaks stay with you most of the way down, dry grass, scattered shade, and that quiet valley geometry coming into focus. By the time you reach Boonville, the landscape levels out into orchards, vineyards, and small farms, the kind of country that tells you you've left the ridge behind and stepped into a slower valley rhythm. Thanks for riding along from Ukiah all the way to Boonville. Appreciate every one of my subscribers for sticking with me to the end of the drive. And if you're new here and enjoyed the trip, you can hop on board for free by clicking my picture at the end of the video. Thanks again for coming along.